kids, and funnily enough, my father studied at BITS Penali. I got admission in the dual mechanical degree in BITS Penali, of course, more than 30 years back. I didn't choose that because I got computer sciences, Instead of choosing a dual degree, I chose a,
computer
like
science,
a single degree, because it was traditionally chosen to be a better path, traditionally, I'm not saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we'll come to some of the things that you're raising. You raised very important question, but let me bring in, I remember meeting Sandeep a couple of months back for the first time, and he gave me his idealistic vision on what the Vega schools are doing. So let me ask Sandeep your comments on the new education policy, and does it address some of the reasons why you started Vega schools?
Thank you, Annurag. Thank you so much for having me on the panel. The reason I started Vega is that I wanted to be involved in change, and I spent about 3 years traveling the world, trying to understand education systems that have worked really well, and schools that have made change happen. And initially, my travels took me to schools like Eton and the schools, the more traditional schools.
Very privileged schools.
Privileged schools.
They really amplify the divide of every kind. Yes, my first boss was from, he's a Britisher and he was from Eton in my first job before I turned.
Yes. So I began my journey, going to the centers, the perceived and known centers of excellence. And then I realized and I learned something very interesting. What I learned was that the real innovation in schools around the world was actually not happening at schools such as Eton, Harrow, etc. And the reason was that they had no reason to change. They were already making a lot of money. They have the best families.
Best of the families.
Exactly, most sought after. The greatest sort of innovation was occurring in schools that were usually located in difficult neighborhoods, and this was true across Europe. It was true in South America. It was applicable across the United States and of course other countries. And coming back to the education policy, since I also studied some of the things that worked well across the world, I think this education policy itself is a great directional change document. It is visionary. It has some of these interesting reforms, and of course these are the first set of reforms we've had after 34 years, which is very interesting in itself. My wife works with the World Bank, and I have therefore some interesting access to some interesting numbers from the World Bank. According to the World Bank, today in India, we only about 50% of the children by the age of 10 can read basic text. Now this is a serious issue, and therefore I think what the government has done by introducing the foundational literacy and numeracy that it plans to have in place by 2025, I think is a really good idea. Countries such as Brazil, South America, Kenya, Philippines started similar policy. They made similar policy changes where they looked at addressing FLN, foundational literacy and numeracy, and they saw great success. So I think it's a very good move. Furthermore, we are now looking at the National Assessment Center. Now, assessment is also very, very, very important. I think we are going to call it Parak. And again, similar moves in Australia, US, and Brazil were made, and they proved to be very beneficial. Our key stage exams that are going to be introduced in this new policy are very similar to the models that were adopted by Chile, Mexico, and UK and Australia, and they proved to be quite successful. These reforms have also worked quite well in Uruguay, Brazil, Chile, Tanzania, even Bangladesh, which is an Asian context as well. So the bottom line is that what's in the document, if it's implemented well, will make substantial reforms, substantial changes. My life changed when I visited a school called High Tech High in San Diego. This is a chain of 13 schools that are located in very, very difficult, poor neighborhoods of San Diego, of the San Diego region, where a lot of Mexican families send their students. And I saw when I entered the school, firstly, it took me 6 months to get into the school because there are about 3,000 visitors a year, and you have to pay $100 and wait several months before you can get access to the school. I entered the school and I saw there people from the Ministry of China, the Beijing government education officials. I saw I met with some officials from New Zealand, from the education ministry. And I was curious. I said, what on earth are these guys doing in San Diego all the way? And all of them said that, basically they have come to learn the how. How do you make a change at the school level? We can define the whats, and the what is very important to be defined. But the question is, how does it happen? So what High Tech High had done was they had taken a pedagogy called PBL, project-based learning, also broadly known as problem-based learning. And this pedagogy really is about, it's based on a lot of metacognitive research around how and why we learn. And it's all about going into the depth of knowledge. My co-founder, Dr. Stephen Edwards, talks about DOK. And this is very interesting. About 99% of the schools in the world operate in something called DOK1 and DOK2. DOK1 is just learning for recall, learning something to write it in a test. DOK2 is learning something to take one or two steps with what one has learned. For example, solving a quadratic equation is DOK2. DOK4 is learning and applying what you've learned to find new and better ways of doing things. And we're talking all about innovation now. And innovation is what will take this country forward, take India forward. So PBL is a great pedagogy that applies or trains children how to apply to find new and better ways of doing things. And that's the reason we started Vega schools, because we wanted our children to operate in the realm of DOK4. And we also created Vega schools so it could be an agent of change, where people could visit and see how things can be done differently. And we're very fortunate. We have lots of visitors coming in, and we're open source. We very happily share what we do. So circling back to the new education policy, I think all the whats have been defined really well. And at Vega, we believe in positive reinforcement rather than criticism. So we want, we want to sort of talk about the education policy at the moment from the perspective of positive reinforcement. Well done, government. Great job at defining the what and perhaps even the why. And now it's time to focus on the how.
Thank you, Sandeep. In a webinar, if you have 6 people, you start with someone, you end with someone. I do this, and then person who's the last, then I start with them in the second round. So let me get in Ms. Meghana Musunuri. If I got your name right, second name, first one isn't tough. So your opening comments, you heard your colleagues from various backgrounds with various experiences say what they have said about the new education policy. Your comments as a leading education leader.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Annurag, for inviting me on this platform and making me a part of this panel. It's so nice to hear from everyone, their opening statements, and it's a good insight for me to understand on the higher education and on the research front what's what is still not discussed. So. Basically, because I'm from the school education and the school background, I completely, I'm happy that because the new, education policy is in par with any developed countries today that we know of. So this showcases that, we are ready for that change. I understand there are a lot of questions on how are we going to do it. So, for example, this takes me back to my own experience on how do you collaborate with today's technical giants to bring in any change. there are many areas, many ways to understand how it can be implemented. And I'm sure, Google for Education is one of the platforms, but that they've created so that, people can actually share their best practices. So we can actually take this to the government and then try and understand, how these things can be implemented. Because most of the private education system, they are looking out for these kind of solutions, and they are implementing already most of the things what are being, mentioned in this new national education policy. But when it comes to government, and then, the amount of, I keep hearing my co-panelists mentioning, where are we going to get that money from and all of that. And as you, mentioned, are they going to be online universities? I'm sure that is the way towards, when we look at the future, this is how education is going to, have a huge paradigm shift when it comes to, futuristic learning. But when it comes to schooling, I'm sure the children still needs to socialize. Children still needs to learn, those leadership qualities and being a part of a team and all of that. So I really appreciate, how they are trying to formalize the early childhood, education also as part of the government, because that was never a formal thing before. It was okay, you had some play schools around or you had some Anganwadis around, but I'm so glad that, they are trying to bring in a structure in that area as well, because, those are the primary formative years of a child when we are looking into education. One of the main reasons why, the higher population is not able to read until the age of 10 is because there was no structured, process of teaching and learning when it is to when it comes to youngest students. So this is something which is a fresh breath of air when I heard about national education policy and all of that. But when it says at a large that it's going to take about 20 years for the government to implement, we are in a stage where the change is it's fast. It's not that it's going to take, because every 5 to 7 years there is a new set of students who are coming in with new thought processes, new mindsets, new requirements when it comes to. So I feel we shouldn't be looking at this as a long-term project. Rather, we should all try and join our hands together and try and help both on the government front and on the private front as well, to get this implemented and to get this in place. So we can always have a center, like a repository kind of a thing, where all these house can be put into, so that it becomes easier. See, when we say there should be one policy throughout the country, because India is so diversified, when it comes to every state and the requirements of individual states.
By the way, education is a state subject, as all of us.
It's always been a state subject. I feel
there is the issue of languages. We need to do a whole discussion around what is a national language, how does the state deal with it, should there be any preference,
right?
Because because you may brought out this dimension now.
Absolutely. So because previously it was mandatory to know certain languages, because how is it helping when you're traveling to one place to another place, so that to communicate. But today, thanks to technology, language is never a barrier for anything now. No matter what language you can speak, you're still able to communicate with all these tools which are in place. So it is more towards bringing in that awareness of using technology into education, I think, is the way forward towards it. And then this doesn't come with a huge amount of money or anything. It comes with right partnerships. So I feel the how is done through right partnerships, because I really love the way, when they are saying the multidisciplinary starts right from their high school, right from their 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th. So this is going to create more, hands-on experience to children. And definitely, in other countries, you don't have to be a graduate to be employed. All you have to do is know a skill. So similarly, when we are encouraging the vocational courses, I'm sure, the employability of this next generation would be definitely high. And when we are talking about multidisciplinary higher education institutions and all, there is a big scope for entrepreneurship, which is needed for a country with a huge population like us, 1.3 billion people, and then where majority of them are youngsters. So I am so happy that and I understand for a country as large as ours, it takes a lot of effort to implement these things. But I feel everybody in education, doesn't matter whether they're from the government or the private sector, if we lend hands to try and help this implement, I'm sure future is going
Absolutely.
to be so great and beautiful when we follow this, because education is the passport for the future. We all believe in that. And then yes, when we say that as India is a progressive country, definitely education has to be the first thing which has to be on par with the rest of the world as well.
Let me bring in, my parents are academicians. I know Mukesh's father was in the BITS Pilani administration and management. One of the things I used to say on TV debates 10 years back, that our drivers are paid more than some of our teachers. Right? It was a dramatic statement. It's true, by the way. It's not a false statement. A primary school teacher would get 15,000, whereas my driver would get 18,000 rupees. So it's not like, 10 years back I was off from what I was saying. But one of the things the NEP talks about is reskilling the teachers, improving the pay scales of teachers, because while teachers come into teaching for passion, Sandeep talked about change, for impact, but also they have families to run. And bright minds are also attracted to money, right? There is different people have different things that motivate them, but I want to focus on what does the new education policy envisage for teachers. And again, there is lack of granularity there. How? So I want to start with you, Professor Isaac. How do you think we can get better teachers, pay them well, and in turn make learning more fun or more relevant? When you talk of fun and learn, sometimes in India it can be misconstrued, though ideally fun and learn should go along. How do you make sure by improving the quality, quantity of teachers and the remuneration that you pay them, how do you impact the education ecosystem and do justice to the new education policy? Professor Isaac?
Yeah, that's a very good question which you have posed to me. The problem with the teaching fraternity or the availability of good teachers is a real issue which is faced by all educational institutions across the country, whether it's the national institutes or private institutes. But
we lost you, Professor Isaac.
okay.
You cannot criticize the new education policy. If you do, this is what happens. New algorithm.
Now it's okay?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. So what the issue here is that how do we train our teachers to do a project-based learning, how to make the classes interesting to the students. And see, one thing which we lack in this country in the higher education sector is research. How do you make these teachers to do research? The research, consultancy, social activities are all part of the teaching or the teachers, apart from the teaching. So how do you equip all these teachers to be a good researcher? Today or yesterday, you would have read in the newspaper that the Yale University researchers have developed a simple method of testing for COVID-19 from the saliva, which is very cheap. So that has come from a university system. So how do we equip our university system?
So we got our incubators wrong. Except maybe 5, there's no real incubators in India. Even in the Atal Innovation Mission, government said space is mandatory. You have to have what has space to do with innovation, right? Physical space.
That's a good thing.
Which you got to match that. So I think the way we look at incubators and industry school interface at any level, I think we have a long way to go there. That's my personal view. I want to come to Dr. Lata Vaidyanathan. How do you improve the quality of teachers? How do you pay them better? How do you attract the brightest minds to teaching? And how to make sure they upgrade themselves every now and then to stay relevant?
So it's actually the entire quality of education will lie in the quality of the teachers. So let's first start with the infrastructure. I was looking at this whole policy, and I was looking at how many new institutions, given that marginal addition of 6% to 6 of GDP that they have envisaged for this place. I was looking at the number of institutions that they want to set up, whether it is or additions to the existing systems. For example, whether it is Parak, whether it is the NPST, whether it is the SSSA and the SQAF. So you can see a whole lot of things which are now focusing on quality. But I want to talk about teachers. You see, I think I was reading this paper and I was listening to the Finnish system. The best quality teachers, the best paid people in their country are the teachers, and the most difficult way to select teachers belongs to them. So I believe they have some 4 or 5 rounds of why you need to be a teacher, what qualifies you to be a teacher, how do you get trained, and they go into this very detailed training. As I think, I don't know whether it was Sandeep or others, who said they have gone through a lot of countries to identify a good system that would actually help a different system. Now, if you seriously, today there is a demand and supply issue. We have very clearly not changed the way in which teacher training happens in this country to begin with. We are still confused whether it is 1 year, 2 years, and now or 3 years. And now we are talking of 2 years, 1 year, or even less, including a 6-month certification to make, even in the new policy, to make a teacher training thing possible. Now, here is the issue. First of all, I think marginally with the 6th and 7th pay commissions coming in, the salaries are at least a little more dignified. This is the last profession into which actually people buy in. And the training that has happened 40 years back still continues to be as redundant as it is now. There are dimes and dozens of B.Ed certification institutions which crop up and disappear. And then when you look at the certification, you don't even know how authentic it is. Ultimately, schools resort to capacity building and online and professional development as it happens. So if you look at the whole structure today, firstly, dignify the profession. I think the salary should be at par with the very best in the industry today, and a teacher can make a CEO but can't be paid like a CEO. So let us start with that. I think we need to improve their conditions of work. We also need to see what is the pupil-teacher ratio within the classes. If it is 1:40, 1:52, the best quality teacher will fail. Therefore, I think we need to look at first the training, the attractiveness of the teachers to come into schools, then the training and the capacity building, and then the pupil-teacher ratios, and also the number of periods you give them to teach. If you want quality, if you want them to research, if you want them to examine the various pedagogies, as even mentioned in this document, starting from being experiential learning, or whether it is PBL, or whether it is art integrated learning, or whether it is sports integrated learning. In fact, I was also reading about the storytelling pedagogy. If you want all these absolutely beautiful pedagogies to come into the system, you need humongous amount of training, and both, whether it is private or government, schools and should have budgets for training, less number of teaching hours, less pupil-teacher ratios, more amount of facilities. And it's rather interesting to see, I think I just noted it down, that when we look at the skills, capacities and other things building, but a reduction in the number and reducing the stake of the examinations, I think the teachers are the most confused lot. They ask me, why are we reducing this? Because they don't feel comfortable when they look at the entire things which has already happened in view of the pandemic. But at the same time, we are saying that, we need art, we need gender studies, we need cross-curricular studies. I think there's a whole list of stuff that we need to add on.
There is a
Are we increasing
contradiction
it?
there.
So there is a contradiction. Exactly. You are reducing it and you're saying low stakes. And then for each of the activities, capacities, skills, and other things that we want to build up, there is a whole lot of newer subjects that are being introduced, for which there is absolutely no degree training right through their educational stuff. So what are we looking forward to doing? It's all required. It's absolutely required that we do all of this. And suddenly now we can see that the skill developing, because of the skill ministry, every day you open up the CBSE circular area, academic area, every day there is a circular which says which board. This morning, for example, they trained us about on sports grid as opposed to physical education. I want to know that in order to make a difference to the quality of the transaction pedagogically through training of teachers and attracting the best in this profession, if you're going to change the titles and invite agencies to do different things, is it really going to make a difference? And the key stage assessments that are mentioned in this document, at 3, at 5, at 8, at 10, and at 12, are we going to make robo-practitioners of examinations? And while detailing has to yet come from NCERT and the assessment centers, I have to say that, for example, Peru has a lovely system. It talks of, when we look at the PISA scores and our own ratings and blah, blah, when we look at the Peru system, for example, it says you need to read 60 words per minute or 90 words per minute. These targets have been exemplified very beautifully. There is a system. We have not yet latched on to those systems, and we are trying gimmickry to make sure that this happens. I'm not being necessarily critical about this system. I'm only feeling anxious that let's create, first of all, opportunities and attractive ways of hiring teachers. Let us then make sure that once they are hired, can we really, even in the government, they take them for a Bharat Darshan to see what it is. Within the school, the moment a person comes, we hand over a timetable and say, do it this way. Can we give them some amount of time to study the systems? Can we create within our timetables time for people to research and search into what kind of pedagogy will be required for what transaction? Are we holding their hands? We are doing none of those. We are filling them with numbers, whether it's private or public, our population, our demand and supply systems. All these are so lacking. And then when we have less numbers and better quality in private schools, we charge higher fees because we have to do that. And so it becomes special. Obviously, we are talking of, we are even talking of apprenticing. We are talking of 10 no school days, going out and working out with people, getting out of the school ecosystem. First, let's create the ecosystem for excellence with specific references to our teachers, be it sports, be it skills, be it subjects, and all of that. And then look at assessment at the key stages, you will find some change. I'm sure, this is not a story. What we are discussing here is clearly not a story of good private schools. This is a story of the government where still crores of children are still out of school. And when they talked about this the first 5 foundational years, I think it's a very beautiful system that they're thinking about. And we are, what is our rush? World over, the age of entry into class 1 is 7 somewhere. It's 6 somewhere. What is our hurry? Can we first start with this? In fact, some teacher asked me, next year, are we going to have 6 years old in class 1? Nobody's clear. So the point is, between the policy, between the dream and its execution, I think there's a lot of gap. Of course, we are responsible. We don't have to find somebody else to deliver it. We need to deliver it. And I'm not going to be, and I as an educator feel that, and as educators, as a cohort, we feel that I think everything is not government dependent. We need to take charge, dignify our schools and learning processes and our teachers, give them just that amount of work so that they have some free time to look. We are looking for free time for collaborative learning in a PBL for children. What about teachers? We say that they need time to go out. In fact, I want to mention this very briefly, just one more point. I was talking to this Finnish teacher who says, maximum I think our school operates on 20 hours of teaching a week. Will that ever work in our schools? It will not, because we are looking at 45 periods, 35 periods per teacher. When is she, other than the textbook, where does she have the time to even look at something else? And then following circulars after circulars, implementation of implementation.
That pandemic is shown
50 hours of teaching. And then, of course, now we have the pandemic. But 50 hours of capacity building has been mandated in this. Earlier also, it was not less. We would say, okay, at least 15 days, said the Kendriya Vidyalayas. And there are others who said, okay, at least let's have 15 days of teacher training. And it became like a structure rather than finding out areas. Have we ever looked at ACR saying what is a developmental profile? What does the teacher want?
What are we doing to empower and kind of reskill the teacher? We could go on talking. I need to bring in everyone. This is why what you're saying is so real and so honest. And it's just true. There are contradictions, and
there are a lot of contradictions in the
policy. I want to bring in everyone here. Get closing comments now from everyone. I can start with Mr. Sharma. Mukesh, your closing comments on where do you see this going? What is your bit of advice? And if you had to predict something in the education system, what do you think would happen? Mukesh Sharma? We'll have to unmute yourself, Mukesh. I'm reading your comments on the
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Annurag. Again, I would just like to say a few words related to your last question, which Mrs. Lata was speaking about. At Prometheus, we've taken care of all these factors. Our teachers are paid more than the software engineers that we have, freshers that we hire. Our teachers are paid more than them. And teachers are given time every week, every day they have time for professional development. It is not just that, you tell them to work towards professional development without any direction. So there is direction that is provided to them. There are, if you just look at our tweets, we are having series of sessions by external speakers, who are experts in this, who've been, so we have got this, IB candidate school, and the learning, which is play-based learning. It is not like, you have to rote things. So we are doing all that. Teachers have to be compensated well. In fact, you would be surprised to hear this. I want to exit out of IT. I want to give back through school because I know that I can create the difference. And if I am willing to move into education and have schools like Prometheus, wherein teachers who are taking up teaching as a career, not just because it's 8 to 3, but also because they are passionate about teaching. They are they've got those skills. They are smart. They know what they are doing. Attracting them requires paying them, remunerating them well. So that is something that we are already doing. And I don't want to go into numbers, but that's something that is happening. You would be surprised to know that we started our school on September 30th, 2019. 5 months in school, and pandemic hit. We were within overnight, we were online. So online, I'm not saying online meaning, Zoom session, conduct online classes. The availability of platforms that allow collaboration on online sessions. Now, Microsoft Team is a platform wherein, teacher is interacting. If you've got 20 children in a class, it is difficult. We've ensured that only 12 children maximum are handled by a teacher. So if we had 20 children in one class, we split it into 2 sections because we want to make sure that we deliver the best, that it has to be meaningful engagement. You can't be just having a teacher go in and take the online session without any meaningful engagement.
It's not like speaking to a camera.
Absolutely.
Learning is a different process. Mr. Mittal, one of the questions that is coming is the reason that education hasn't developed is because for like Birlas and their other names, who have not treated it like a business. They have treated it like a philanthropic endeavor. As long as the school was sustainable, they were happy to build those schools. So what is your view on that, Mr. Mittal?
See, I think, that is why, that because of that reason, we don't have too many BITS Pilanis or this thing. We have still limited number of BITS schools and those kind of schools. I mean, in the end, I don't say that no education has to be run like a business, but I think it should be run with as much passion as much you're running your business, because you want to make money out of it and you put a lot of passion in that. I think any education has to be done with that passion. That's more important. May not be the same intention, but with the same passion. If that passion would be there, we will definitely see that growth. I mean, you mentioned about that. I just want to come back to your last question where you said that, so you visited the campus, it's a lovely campus, and what's going to happen with the big, beautiful campus that we have built? Is it going to go on cloud? So I know cloud going to say is digital.
But that's not what I'm referring to.
So I think, I always tell people that, universities and college education is not just about learning new technologies. I think business is more of building up the personality, making the network, building, creating that opportunity for them to do something new, innovative, to give them space to do that. So I think university is more than that. If everything is could be taught online, I mean, there could not be Harvard, Stanford, who would be charging 50 lakh rupees a year for their degree programs. I mean, everything can go online. But I think the kind of networking that lovely professional university provides, where students are coming from 50 different countries, the kind of space, you said, Innovation Award, Atal Innovation Award has a space as a parameter provider. So by the way, we are among the top 25 Atal Innovation Award winners. But I think space is required. It's not about you have a space or not, but how you have utilized that space. We have an innovation studio where if you want to build a car, where are you going to build a car? You need to give them a space to a student to build a car. If you want to build a program, you need a space for an incubation center to have that space to build that the projects, or to have a discussion with each other. So I think it's not important to have these space, but it's very important to utilize space. And going forward, I think it's going to be a lot of blending learning. You said about what prediction. I think it's going to be a lot of blending learning. That would be my prediction, but definitely not that, the offline education is going to go in the cloud, really. I don't think that's going to happen.
Thank you, Aman. Meghana ji, your final comment on what are the first steps you see making in line with the national education policy in your sphere of work, in your institution?
Currently, we follow most of the thing which is mentioned in national education policy because, of my exposure in working in London schools. So, we try and bring in a lot of problem solving through, we've revived a lake, we let the children revive a lake. So it's problem identification and problem solution, which is going to build a better neighborhood. So at Fountainhead, we try and implement all these things. And there is one answer for your question, how are we going to increase the ability of the teachers, or how are we going to upskill our teachers? So we have something called 360-degree evaluation for a teacher, where we try and handhold them to help them improve on different areas, because every teacher comes in with a different skill set. So we can't just say that, because you you are only this skilled, we will be only able to provide you this. With the new education policy, we wanted teachers who are multitaskers, who will be able to guide children in all these different areas that we wanted to teach them. So definitely this time we need to focus more on upskilling our teachers with implementing 360-degree evaluation. It's not the teacher says I got it. It's more or less I learned it, and this is where I implemented it, and this is the outcome of it. So this is not very difficult when we actually have a solution which is inbuilt with the school, because all these things today we have thanks to all the technology, that we can actually do all these things at the fingertips. So it is not very difficult to try and improve the teachers' abilities or teachers' upskilling. I think the school should start collaborating with the right set of digital companies, so that they know, okay, this is what we needed. We wanted a custom made solution for this, definitely. And I agree, all that huge spaces will not go wasted, but technology is going to replace those places as well. Everything might mostly be virtual, and because our requirements also will change. See, when today with pandemic, we know there are a lot of things that can be done without stepping out of the house, right?
Sure.
So similarly, there are a lot of venues which would come up saying that you don't need a car to go out or to get anything done. So there are many more new things which can come up. I'm not saying the cars will be completely out of the roads or anything.
I understand.
Yeah. So these are few things you just have to be innovative. You just have to be futuristic. Accept these changes with open arms. Yes, there will be glitches, but there will be solutions as well. If there is a problem, there definitely will be a solution which will be there. And I feel a lot of companies which they did not take this as a profitable or an organization is because of the system that we have in our country. It is considered to be a non-profit organization, but it is always the taxes which are collected from are all commercial taxes for the schooling. So that is where I feel at least the new education policy should give clarity on those levels. And should be able to help handhold the private system as well. There is a lot of intervention from the government on the private school system, but not at this level. So this will discourage a lot of people who wanted to be there and then contribute something, they get confused. So
Sure.
clarity is always definitely is going to help, and I'm sure national education policy is amazing, and all we have to do is implement it. And then we have many people who are experts in different areas. Try and bring all of them onto these platforms so that it can get implemented.
Thank you. Mr. Hooda, if there is one thing that you thought was very good in the NEP and you are not doing, what would that be?
The one thing, yes.
Implementing in your school. I mean, I'm not talking.
Yes. And so the one thing that that caught our eye in the NEP was focus on research. Now, there's all kinds of pedagogies, teaching methodologies, but there's very little research really on what really makes the difference to a child, so that the child is ready for the world of the future. So we have been thinking about, over the past few months, commissioning some research studies. We call it just simple A/B research to start with, and the A/B research will look at. But of course, for this we need the pandemic to be done and over with. But the A/B research will basically look at what is being taught at traditional schools, how it's being taught, and the learning outcomes. And compare those pedagogies, methodologies with the more progressive pedagogies and methodologies such as PBL, problem-based learning that I talked about. There's experiential learning, there's expeditionary learning, there is inquiry-based learning, there is, as Lata ma'am said, storytelling-based learning, something that I heard you today. We
Design thinking.
Design thinking. So a lot of our pedagogy is based on design thinking principles. We use something called the I lead cycle. So we want to focus on research, and I think the new education policy is also looking at research. Annurag, design thinking, as you rightly said, I think this is a big piece, because if we keep doing what we've always been doing, we'll end up with the same outcomes. So I think we need to really look at significant design changes, how we teach teachers. I mean, I think teacher training is the only profession, at least that I know of, where you're teaching somebody how to teach when there are no children around. It's like learning to drive a car sitting in a classroom. It can't work. Similarly, there is, of course, there are a lot of salary mismatches. And I think what my colleague here, Mukesh, talked about, the school in the cloud. I think school in the cloud could be something very interesting. Now, we don't have to go to the extreme of creating a school that's only in the cloud, but we can definitely look at a hybrid system where we can attract, say, the best teacher in Cochin to teach at Vega schools and pay that person much more because they're just outstanding in what they do. And this could be done online. So I think a lot of exciting things related to design changes is what we are looking at.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hooda. We could go on. We've barely scratched the surface on what the new education policy is. I mean, at least there are 6 dimensions that can take a 1.5 hour session each. I'd like to thank all our panelists, Mr. Aman Mittal from the lovely professional university, Ms. Meghana Musunuri, the founder and chairperson of the schools in Hyderabad, Mr. Mukesh Sharma, chairman and founder of the Prometheus school, Professor Kuncheria Isaac, Mrs. Lata Vaidyanathan, Mr. Hooda, and last but not Mr. Aditya Berlia. So thank you for making it an engaging conversation. I haven't looked at my phone in 90 odd minutes. It was a very real conversation and we could go on. So look forward to another BW education, conversation with you. We have our BW Education 40 under 40 jury on the 26th. We have another 4 days of nomination. So we'd like you to spread the word. We already got, for the pandemic, to get the number of nominations we've got. It shows that our education community has progressed a lot. So we look forward to our next initiative, which is the BW Education 40 under 40. And next month is the B School rankings of Businessworld and BW Education that come out. And the month after that is the top education branch that BW Education does. So we look forward to connecting again with you. Thank you. Good evening. God bless you.